Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke, but I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
All right, we're going for number 5. Hang in there. Hang in there. Send me some questions. Send me some quandaries. naturalborn.redhead23@gmail. I better check that email pretty soon. I had Dr. Bob Stein here with me this week. I believe I told you that I had intended to talk about dementia and Alzheimer's as a result of a conversation with him. We will have that conversation, but I am, because it's fresh in my mind, I'm going to talk about it as best I can without him. And I think most of you know dementia's a result of old age. It's not necessarily something you have to catch or get. I firmly believe, as I've spoken in previous podcasts, that it's tied to long-term dissociation. And then Alzheimer's being, let's just call it a higher level. I had a doctor say to me once, dementia is when you can't find your keys. Alzheimer's is when you don't know what the fuck they're for. And that always resonated with me where my mom was concerned. My mother had diagnosable dementia by age 23. Holy shit, there's a slip. 83. She probably had it before that, but the point that it became an issue was one of her aides just felt she shouldn't be driving her car. And I had a friend of mine call me and say, I saw your mom run a couple stop signs. So I'm like, okay. I got her in the car. I drove her on an errand. On the way home from the errand, she rear-ended me, knocked the bumper off my car. I got out, picked up the bumper, looked at her, and she said, what are you doing? Or words to that effect. And I was like, okay, time to take driving away, which was very hard. My mother, driving was her independence, and it broke her heart when I took away driving. But I did. It was more about not her independence, and I just never wanted to hurt her to hurt somebody else, so it was done. So when you're on the dementia track with an elderly person, I personally found it easier than physical pain. I didn't mind what my mother couldn't remember. I didn't mind her repeating herself. I would just always treat it like it was new information as best I could. I'd bust her balls about it as best I could. You know, she always liked her eggs salted. And so I'd serve her eggs and ask her if she wanted salt and ask her for things she would normally be asking me for. And she caught on. She knew I was busting her hump. And once they get the dementia diagnosis, there's testing that has to be done periodically, whether you're with your GP or neurologist. And the testing is very cognitively cruel. The one that is typical is the doctor will say a few words. I remember it being like boat, the color red, and something else. And then they have a conversation with the person and they ask them to reflect on the first few words that they led the conversation with. And that's one of their big determinants. Bob and I had a conversation about somebody he took care of who could do that, but couldn't retain her financial information to know that she had financially enough money to take care of herself. So it was a very different sort of memory loss. She could do more longer term things, but couldn't figure out that even looking at a statement that she wasn't financially sound. And actually, I'll save that story for him because it's actually a good one to speak to the nuances and differences amongst memory loss. But similarly, out of his story and out of my story, I saw my mom it was like going down steps. There would be a decline and then a plateau, a decline and then a plateau. And sometimes she'd decline and rise up, which was interesting that she would have and Bob also spoke to this, that you can decline and then step up and plateau. So it's a little different than the step down. It can be more like this. And I remember one time my mom walked into the supermarket and she just didn't know where the hell she was. And so I started taking things away from her that overwhelmed her. I didn't let her do anything task-oriented where she had to think to do something next. I can remember one time, and this is years before I lost her, I put down, I think it was breakfast, coffee, toast, and she had to, make a couple decisions about buttering her toast, cream in her coffee, and I remember the look on her face, and I just took it away from her and did it for her. So I would do anything task-oriented that required her to think. And I thought it was really interesting when Bob was talking, when you have a brain injury, that he puts people in a position to have to think. Well, dementia's the opposite. You need to take away what they can no longer access. And in my case, with my mom, I put her back in the 40s, her heyday. We would have music from the 40s. Where movies were concerned, we didn't have to go back that far. Her whole realm was like 30s to the 80s. I know in her last couple of months of life, she watched The Sting daily. I would just put it on and it would help her with everything else, the fact that The Sting was on. I used whiteboards to basically selfishly, so I could stop her repeating some of the things she chronically asked me. I made a decision. She lost her sister in November of 23. Mom passed in May of 24. And I made the decision to put on a whiteboard that her sister had passed until her brain. It took about 2 weeks. And she was in the Alzheimer's stages by then, which Alzheimer's is relative. It doesn't mean Alzheimer's with great care is very different than Alzheimer's without care. And brain care, whether it's dementia of Alzheimer's, is paramount. So my mom would wake up and see on a whiteboard that she had lost her sister, and it took her about 2 weeks of grieving and mourning it to then she switched to thinking it had happened very much in the past. And that was okay. Then I took it off the whiteboard, and it was the way I helped her grieve and accept the loss of her sister. All right, I'm hitting stuff here that I haven't. I want to talk more about dementia, Alzheimer's, and hospice as a result of our experience. But just please understand, I haven't thought about this stuff as much as I'm thinking about it right now. Anyway, my point in talking about all this is once the dementia came, I found the testing to be cognitively cruel. I didn't understand the reassessments. And once it crossed over into Alzheimer's, I really didn't understand the reassessments. That goes back to the testing they do. And fortunately, most of my mother's providers didn't want to argue with me. So she didn't have to do these tests. I can remember one provider asked her to draw a clock, and I just reached for the pad, drew something, handed it back. She was in, she was in the hospital for a brain bleed. We had, for several years prior to her brain bleed, which I want to say was I think it was before COVID, because I don't remember any odd restrictions. So say 2019, 2020-ish. This brain bleed that she had, the doctors were asking me how she hit her head, and I'm like, she didn't. So I had to do research and figured out it could be spontaneous. She had a spontaneous brain bleed. We had the EMS people come out to the house. I don't remember. She was just off, I think. So we have the EMS come out, and they we thought maybe stroke, TIA, or these little strokey episodes. The EMS didn't see anything, didn't find anything. So I said, Mom, tell your dragon joke, your dick joke about you've heard it, I'm sure. Mom couldn't tell her dragon joke. So I was like, okay, let's get in the car. I'll meet you at the hospital. So that's how they detected the brain bleed, was because she couldn't tell a joke from the 40s. The neurologist that was assigned to her, and I have a history with neurologists between my own brain, where cocksuck and dicklick are concerned, and then where my mom's concerned. So the neurologist walks in and and he's got a few residents in tow. There were several residents in tow, which of course fires me up, but he started to do the cognitively cruel testing of my mother. Do you know where you are? None of which she could answer. And I was just, at that point, I was really kind of over this stuff. And I looked at him and I said, please don't ask my mother those questions. He said, I have to establish a baseline. I said, then ask her to tell you a dick joke from the 40s. That'll be your baseline. She can't tell you the dick joke. There's a problem. And he looked right at her, and to his credit, he said, Jackie, can you tell me a dick joke? And my mother did. And, whether it impacted him and the 67 residents behind him, I don't know. But I definitely wanted to get across that I thought this testing was cognitively cruel and unnecessary. So, this is where I'm headed with this. So we go on our merry way, and then hospice enters the picture. And I was not a lover of hospice. A lot of people in hospice are doing a great job, and then there's the few that come in like they're Florence Nightingale, and you just want to sort of get them out. I didn't need a ton of help with my mother beyond the aids that I had. The biggest help hospice was, quite frankly, was bathing, because my mother didn't want me to bathe her. She felt it was a dignity thing. She much preferred where other people tended to the toileting, and as long as they could. I mean, obviously there was plenty of times where I had to get involved in that stuff and did, but it was just an arm's length of dignity for my mom. So hospice came in, and Mom was definitely on her way out, but they had, once she hit the 6-month mark, six months with hospice is a big deal, because that's the point at which I think actuarially they plan people to be gone. So that first 6 months is some sort of barometer, and Mom made it through 6 months of hospice, and we were using outside providers still. Her cardiologist, her knees were bone on bone. We were using a pain doctor. After the 6-month mark, hospice started to take issue with the outside providers, and I'm sure it's tied to Medicaid and Medicare and double dipping and all that kind of stuff. So I had an aide at the time who had worked for a patient that never had that issue. The hospice decisions were actually reviewed by his GP. So that's like my frame of reference is why can't mom's doctors, and a hospice collaborate a little bit. Come to find out that my aide had worked for someone who had made $1 million contribution to hospice. So his care was a little different. So where mom was concerned, they wanted her reevaluated. And I think I told a story about the woman who was set in to reevaluate her, and she ended up just sending me to the stratosphere with her lack of compassion. But that was on the heels of one of her nurses really thrown by the fact mom could tell a dick joke from the 40s. She actually called the joke intricate. So the nurse would show up, mom would tell her litany of dick jokes, and the woman would hardly crack a smile. It really, I think, irritated her that mom had that way of still communicating. She couldn't talk about much else, but most people would come in and ask her to tell the joke, and she was not in on the joke in the sense that she really thought she hadn't told it 600 times. So this nurse was really instrumental. I didn't say and I came up with that word. Did you see that? She was really instrumental in getting mom taken out of hospice. So between that and the second person coming in to evaluate her and the cognitive cruelty, I just wouldn't allow it. I was done. She had heart issues. She had plenty of things that were going to take her off the planet. And where I'm concerned, I don't really think about just my mother. I'm thinking they are doing this to everybody. They are quizzing everybody with dementia and Alzheimer's and being cognitively cruel. It was never just about my mother. It's just not how I'm wired. So ultimately, hospice dropped us. And I was fine with that because, as I say, it really came down to bathing and toileting issues. And I just got more involved in that stuff. And, there just came a point where there comes a point where you just do it. And as much as my mother's dignity was paramount, it was more cruel to me to have her quizzed. So I made that decision. So then, after she lost her sister, that was the nail in her coffin. She really just, once it resonated, she started, I knew Christmas 23 was going to be her last Christmas. I had gotten some intuitive insight that I was going to lose her in April. That was my feeling. So we started, going downhill, and I still didn't reach out to hospice again. I think they declined her in February. So this was now April, started actively dying mid-April. And I had a little bit of morphine left because you when you go on hospice, they give you some drugs to use for various problems. I'm not going to describe it. I don't want to make anybody sad, but they give you drugs for problems you're going to have to or may encounter. And morphine was part of it. And we had tried morphine for pain the August prior. I got her out for her birthday. I believe it was August of 23. It may have been 22, but I think it was August of 23. And we got her out on morphine, and my mother was able to tell me that the morphine aided in her memory issues, and she didn't like it. She had no recollection of going to the restaurant. So now, flash forward to she's actively dying, and I've got enough THC to light up. I had tinctures. I had gummies for her. I had stuff for me. we were set. We were going in, but I wanted hospice back involved just in case, quite frankly, I needed the morphine. And I remember, and this is the best I got on this memory. Mom was actively passing. I had called hospice days, let's say a week before she actually did die, and they can reinstate pretty quickly when somebody's actively dying. And I remember they were supposed to come on, say, a Thursday, and I think she ultimately died on the following Friday. But they called me, and because I had been such a pain in the ass, they decided not to come Thursday. They were going to come the following Tuesday with a director. Because the director, because it was our situation, felt he needed to be a part of her hospice visit. And I can remember saying to hospice, she's going to be dead. And I have no morphine. So it was horrible. And she went out on THC. And it's something that I want to talk about. Not necessarily alone, but I want to talk with somebody who can speak to not only, we're big on CBD with the elderly. Yeah, THC is actually was really very helpful. And my mom, grew up having a couple belts of alcohol. And once she couldn't drink anymore, it really enjoyed the THC. Now, there were days she would ask for it, and the days she would look at me and say, "You're giving me drugs?" So we had that. But for the most part, it was and it was the, I've talked about this before because my brain's having the same struggle. It was the sativa, not the indica. And I worked with a pain doctor who was actually really happy for my feedback, whereas I'm thinking I'm going to him for advice, and I'm actually giving him feedback because, now that it's legal, let's bring it into the nursing homes, right? But we're just not there yet. And it's not so much about quelling pain as much as changing the brain towards whatever they're experiencing. And Mom I have a video that someday I'll show where she's high and she just has the giggles. And I'll show it someday. But anyway, so my point in all this is, fortunately, I had something to fall back on, and fortunately, it was medicinal, and fortunately, but it was just such a unfortunate experience with hospice. And yeah, I'm the person who picked up the phone, called the director, said, "I know you got a huge contribution from my AIDS former patient, and you're wrong about dementia and Alzheimer's, where this cognitive cruelty stuff is, and with good care." And, I gave my story, but ultimately in the end, they abandoned her. It was very, very sad. It worked out well for her. I promise you, it was a beautiful experience, as beautiful of an experience as it could be based on the situation. When my mom did not want me in the room in the end. Let's just say that was crystal clear. So watching her last breath and all that jazz was not part of our experience. I was in the other room, a couple rooms away, getting updates from the aide as far as I can remember. I was high. We were having our own 4D experience, which I'll elaborate another time. But once the aide, who had a lot of experience, knew it was the real end, I went over and just called into her. I think all I said was goodbye, Mom, at the top of my voice. And then once she passed, I looked in one time. She had a smile on her face. And I had learned a lot from losing my dad. Like, the open coffin and all that shit. I wasn't going to do that one again. And Mom did not want an open coffin. I think they are becoming less and less popular. I've been to a few services where the coffin was open and you had to ask yourself. That was an interesting choice, so I'm glad. I think I want a burlap bag. Be placed under the trees. Anyway, so I look forward. I appreciate telling that story, and I will relate it back to maybe it's good that you know that before I talk to Bob, because you'll understand now. You'll have some basis for my questions for him. I think he has a really neat perspective on it, and he's very open to my contributions. What's the time check? Oh, I hit 25 minutes? And I'm done and I don't have to do this? I do enjoy it very much. Sorta. Not really. I don't know. Gotta get it out. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
You know why I say appreciate it?
No.
Because somebody in Pennsylvania 100 years ago when I lived here briefly the first time around used to say, appreciate it. And I didn't think about it till I moved back here. Fair enough. Ciao.
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. J-Ma.